metaphor. We use three different kinds of words. We use signs, symbols, and metaphor. And a fact is not a metaphor. It is something that can be observed, and don't cross the street until you look, because the correspondence may not get you across the line.
But we never said that facts are metaphors. We didn't say that.
Well,
I said human language is metaphorical. The concepts that language can refer to are not metaphors.
I think
they may be, but they do not need to be.
I think your words were all words are metaphors, and I wouldn't agree with that.
Human language is what I said.
Other questions? Sir in front.
Sirs, to both of you. Assuming that we're talking about mostly philosophical things, that the science, by virtue of its methodology, excludes metaphysics as do similar methods, I honestly fail to see the difference between your points of view and ask what they really are, in the sense of you're both operating off of irrational suppositions you cannot prove. Those to me are religions. They are both operating off irrational suppositions that I don't understand. In other words, from your life experience, you're saying these things are this way. He says these things are this way. It can be truth, it can be God, whatever. It can be humankind. So what is the real evidence, the real impact, the real difference between your views? I mean, we've talked about you kind of similar views, but what is the real difference?
Well, between our views?
Yes. It's all seems pie in the sky to me right now, so and that's great, but
I think you make a very important point. Whatever I believe will ultimately rest on a presupposition that defies proof. Nothing, that there can be no proof of anything at all that can be drawn so completely that it eliminates the shadow of doubt. It will always be present. As I said yesterday to my friends, I cannot prove to you that the God of the Bible exists. I cannot prove it to you. I must hold it by faith. But by the same token, if Tom says that no one is willing to sacrifice consideration for truth, or no one is willing to sacrifice empathy for truth, he needs to hold that by faith as well. That's a presupposition that he is ultimately not able to prove. And I think then the question is not a dichotomy between faith and reason, or correspondence and coherence. The question is whether to have faith in this or that. That's the question as I see it.
Dr. Walmsley?
Well, I don't have the foggiest idea what faith is. And so that to me is not much of an answer. I don't think anybody in the field of science ever talks about truth. It's a very rare scientist who even uses the word. All of science is based on probability, not on certainty. And so where I was going to go later on was that I think we have to understand the word in those terms, that context. There was a famous exchange between Einstein and Heisenberg, as you may know, and Einstein, both of them were atheists, but they loved to use God as a metaphor, speaking of metaphors. And Einstein used the famous speech, God doesn't play with dice, because Einstein went to his death believing that he or someone would come up with a theory of everything, neatly stacked and neatly described by the universal language that is not metaphoric, and that's mathematics. And this, regardless of language, everybody can understand. 2 + 2, a squared, all that stuff is the same in Chinese as it is in English and every other language. And as some people said, mathematics is the language of God. Okay, given all that, he was convinced this had to be, because it's a rational world and we have to understand it. God doesn't play with dice, he said. You've heard it. To which Heisenberg responds, Albert, don't tell God what to do. What he meant by that was trying to amplify the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty. Uncertainty. All science talks about probabilities. That's the best you can do. If you can't live with probabilities, then the chances you're going to reach out for certainties is very high. Because probabilities may be that kind of high arousal stimulus that you don't have much tolerance for, and so you reach out. And I understand that. I understand the discomfort the lack of certainty provides. And I just think, unfortunately, people who reach out for truths happen to have guns. and this can be very destructive.
Can we get to the next question? Sir in the blue jacket.
My question is for both of you. How do you both define humility?
Humility.
Or what I meant to say was humbleness.
Well, I think you know, in the face of this kind of a world that I think we live in, one way to look at humility is rather than curse the darkness, you light a candle. Does that make any sense to you, Aaron? Give it some thought. I think that the root of humility is the willingness to consider, as Cromwell is saying, I beseech you by the bowels of Christ to consider, you may be wrong. If we all had that attitude, there's no reason why we can't carry on the dialogue. None at all. But there's always that reservation. Oops. I don't know everything there is to know. I can't be certain about anything. Could I be wrong? Of course. And in my lifetime, I guarantee you, I'm not going to know everything there is to know. My students can forgive me for that, but they already know.
Reverend, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think that humility is the ability to understand your position, to understand who you are, who the other person is, to understand who God is, to understand my place in this life that I live. That's humility.
Can I respond just one more time? A little humility.
I have my own set of rules I have to go by.
I'm Professor Emmrich's response to the I love you but I hate your sins intolerant point of view.
Can you repeat your question before you answer it?
Yeah, can you please repeat the question? I didn't quite get it.
Okay. The question she asked is Dr. Walmsley's statement of I love you as a person, but I hate your sin.
All right, I got it, yeah. Now, let me respond by asking you the question, all of you in fact, do you believe that unconditional love is equal, or equals, I should say, unconditional love equals unconditional affirmation of what another person does? Certainly not. At least I would maintain that the two aren't even in the same category. Unconditional love does not imply unconditional affirmation of what another person does. If you were to attack my 2 little girls, I would take action. But that doesn't mean that I don't love you. At the same time, you would do the same because you have certain rights, certain values that you find worth defending. Unconditional love doesn't equal unconditional affirmation. So I can say, I love you, but I do not approve of what you are doing. Every mother, every father, every person in authority will say the same. You all know that this is true.
Dr. Walmsley?
Oh, I don't really know what unconditional love is. To me, it's not a very helpful term. The truth of the matter is, I've always loved the words of the Apostle Paul, the good that I would, I do not, the evil that I would not do, I do. We are much more complicated than that. I doubt that anyone in this room isn't conditioned in some sense. I doubt there's anybody in here that can behave in an unconditional fashion. This is not the same as say that we all have a price. Just how much money you're talking about or what's the prize. But